Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Alder Hour. My voice is gone already. Only just started. Welcome to the second episode of the Alder Hour. I'm Matt Alder. I'm the host of the Recruiting Future podcast, and now I'm also the host of the Alder Hour. It's 8 p.m. in the UK, it's 9 p.m. in the rest of Europe, 3 p.m. on the East Coast, and midday on the West Coast. And this is your new favorite way to end your work day, even if you have got the whole afternoon still to go. The show is part of Purple Acorn, so head over to purpleacornnetwork.com if you want to find out more about some of the other great shows that we've got. You can follow us on LinkedIn. And this episode and all the Purple Acorn shows are also available as podcasts. So you can find them on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Please join in, leave us comments, tell us what you think about the things that we talk about. Really want this show to be as interactive as it possibly can be. And without further ado, I would like to welcome my two amazing co-hosts, Rhona and Jocelyn. Hi there, how are you doing? Here we go. We're very nearly into the holidays, Christmas next week. Is it next week? How have you been celebrating? Anyone had, Rhona, have you had a holiday party in your business?
Not yet. Everyone on my team is in other countries and doesn't celebrate Christmas, so I haven't had office Christmas party. I haven't even done Christmas shopping yet, so that's how
Wow.
behind I am.
Wow, you're making me feel better because I'm in a similar position. Jocelyn, what about you? Holiday parties? Anything
Yeah,
been
we're
going on?
completely remote, so we're doing a remote holiday party at the end of the week.
Well, how does a remote holiday party work? Talk us through that.
Well, I guess it's different for each organization, but for us, I sent gift cards to all of my employees so that they could order some drinks over at their house. And then we are going to all get together, play some games, chat about what we're doing on the holidays, have a couple drinks together. And then, that's kind of the end of it. I had thought about doing like a white elephant type of thing, but like Rhona, just wasn't able to get around to it, unfortunately.
And it's kind of it's always a bit of a minefield, isn't it? Holiday parties for HR. I had a friend who had one last week, and they kind of started in the afternoon, and then it officially finished at 6 o'clock. But they kind of went on, but that was very clearly not on the company's time or on their liability. So it's an issue. It's an issue, isn't it, for some businesses?
It can be. I mean, you think about, well, you consider really two big liability issues, one being alcohol at a work event, and then the other being, do you make it mandatory for individuals to go? And if you do, are you supposed to pay them? So, that those are two things that HR really needs to take into account when they're planning a holiday party.
Absolutely. Well, it's just me and my business, and I haven't had one either. But I'm going to try and make time to, to go to the pub to reflect on the year, and congratulate myself for getting through to December. So, what have you got coming up for us in your segments? Jocelyn, what do you have for us this week?
Sure. So today we're going to be talking about an employee who has another coworker in the workplace who is constantly coming to their office to talk. But the things that they were talking about make this employee very uncomfortable. Some of it is maybe even could be considered a little violent. And this individual is really impacting their ability to be productive. And even though they feel like they've showed clear signs that they are not interested in having these conversations, they haven't stopped. So we'll talk about what to do in a situation like that.
Okay, interesting stuff. And Rhona, what do you have for us?
It's really a topic I've been obsessing about lately, and it's like policies, AI policies or AI use policies during the hiring process. Like, should we have a policy? Should we embrace it? Should we tell candidates what they can do and what they can't do? And are these policies, I found one, are they going to stick around? So excited to chat
Oh,
about that.
cool. Yeah, that's I mean, that is a big topic. So looking forward to the rest of the show. And at this point, it's time for Points and Pints. Okay, so for people who didn't watch last week, at this point of the show, I crack open a beer because it's the end of the workday. It certainly is for me anyway. And once more, I'm drinking non-alcoholic beer or low-alcoholic beer because I have to drive home. Next week I don't, so I'll have something different. And this one, it's called Lucky Saint, and it's kind of a bit of a it's a massive thing in the UK at the moment. All the pubs have this on draft. There's a few sort of different versions of it, and it's low alcohol. It's very tasty. I've managed to open it without spraying it everywhere. We'll just put that on camera, and it's fizzed up massively. So that's a pleasure. So I would attempt to drink this while we talk through two articles that have sort of come to our attention this week. So the first one, now this is a continuation from the conversation that we had last week. Please, by the way, please join in, send us your comments. If you've got a favorite low alcohol beer, maybe drop that in the comments. Let us know what it is. Be interested to see. But yeah, particularly on this, I think this is something that everyone, everyone should sort of be talking about. So last week, we looked at a headline. The fintech company Klarna, which is a European-based business, in January, they made some headlines because they said that they were avoiding hiring 700 customer service staff because they were putting conversational AI into their customer service, and that was going to sort of take over. Last week, we were discussing a headline that the CEO said that they are planning on getting rid of half of their workforce, another 1,000 people, by replacing them with AI. So the customer service experiment had worked really well. The company had saved money. It improved its customer service metrics. It was solving problems quicker, had less repeat problems, happier customers. And so they were kind of rolling this out to sales, to marketing, to all kinds of things. And to me, this was just enormous. I think this is the biggest story in TA and HR for the year. And I'm just amazed that people aren't talking about it more than they actually are. So huge implications here. First of all, for the type of people that we recruit, there's there are less people because AI is replacing them. But also, if AI is replacing all of these kind of roles, then it's logical that CEOs, CFOs, reading this kind of article, all these sort of things, are going to think about TA, HR as part of this. What can we automate? What can we use AI for? So, this is huge. I think, as I said last week, this is, we see these trends, we see these kind of predictions, we see new technology coming on board. We talk about the future. This is the future happening in real time. And I think we've seen this a lot with AI this year in certain kind of spaces. It's already kind of going much quicker than we thought it was going to go. So that was kind of last week. Now, this week, new article. First of all, the way that they've avoided, what they did at the beginning of the year is they stopped hiring people. So that's how they've cut their workforce through attrition, basically. So they stopped hiring people. Huge implications for talent acquisition there. And they've done this through attrition. And the two interesting things that really kind of pop up in this article. First of all, you start to wonder, how do you motivate your staff if they all know that you're planning on trying to find ways to replace them with AI? How do you motivate the humans that you have? And what's interesting is it talks about, the CEO says that they've promised that the people who work there will share in the financially share in the benefits of the efficiencies that they are creating. So they're actually incentivizing people to create more efficiencies and use AI in more places. That's quite interesting. And then the second part of this, on a recent earnings call, the same CEO actually sent an AI version of himself to do the earnings call. So kind of a video AI version of himself to do the earnings call, to prove that AI can replace any job and that he could be replaced by AI. I think this is kind of fascinating. I mean, really please send us some thoughts and comments on this, because I think it's such a it's such a big thing, basically. But also, I detect a little bit of kind of performative things going on from this company as well, because it's a company that's making a loss. It's not it's valued less than it was a few years ago, and this very much seems to be the PR angle that the CEO is using, to talk about the future and what they're doing and how they're innovating. So I think there's that aspect to it, but actually fundamentally, the numbers and what they're doing seem to kind of really add up. So as I said, this is the kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to the effect that AI is going to have on jobs, but also obviously specifically for what we're talking about on HR and talent acquisition. So what does everyone think? Jocelyn, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really hard thing for talent acquisition professionals and HR professionals to tackle. If I was a head of HR at this company and the CEO sent an AI version of himself on an earnings call to show that anybody can be replaced, that'd be a nightmare for me, because I now have employees thinking literally anybody can be replaced. So how do I have any job security here at all? And I'd think that they'd be stampeding to the door. I don't know what that message was really, who it was for, but it certainly wasn't for the employees. So this is really tough, and I talked about this last week. HR really needs to be responsible for upskilling employees and ensuring that there are career ladders that are transparent, and helping employees kind of cross-train and upskill so that they can potentially move into other positions in the future that might complement AI, rather than AI just kind of replacing them. I do think the idea of compensating them with bonuses related to efficiency is interesting and makes sense. But I also think it's really important for a company like this to be extremely transparent with their AI strategy, so that the workforce feels not only comfortable with what's happening, but bought into the strategy itself.
Yeah, I think that upskilling thing is just a great point. It's just something that's kind of missing from this narrative. It's just like, well, we don't need customer service people anymore, and there's assumptions about, well, we don't need as many people in marketing anymore. We don't need to use marketing agencies anymore. We're taking this as an assumption. We don't need as many TA people anymore or HR people anymore because we're not hiring people. All this kind of stuff. But it's like, what do we need? What do we need? What does the workforce look like? And I think that helps with the conversation in terms of like planning and training and understanding that. So that's kind of missing from this a little bit. Rhona, what's your take on this 1 week on from when we discussed it last time?
No, I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying. And I think from a talent attraction perspective, it's going to be challenging to, when they want to hire an actual human, to to have someone motivated enough to want to work at a company whose entire strategy is to figure out how to not have humans. That being said, I think you can always find people that are interested in whatever the strategy is of the company. You just have to be very open about it. The CEO is helping because he's clearly wanting to be in these headlines, so people are going to know. Some people might be interested in being the person always trying to show that they are the human that needs to be there, while they are the person who can find efficiencies. It's going to be challenging for the TA team, but not impossible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it really is that. What is it that humans are going to do? And I think it's something that we need to talk about a lot more. What are the kind of adjacent skills to AI? All those kind of things, because things like this they always create headlines, don't they? It's machines are taking over, they're taking all the jobs, but it's kind of like, where's the bigger conversation about? What does the future look like? What do we all do? Are we heading towards a world of leisure with no work? Are we heading towards some horrible dystopia? It's just I think it's those types of conversations I think would be very useful to be having everywhere in 2025. So thank you. So let's move on to the next one. And this second one is it's an article about pay transparency and reshaping talent acquisition and compliance. Now, up front, I'm going to say I'm not an expert on all of the laws around pay transparency. I know that it's something that the EU focuses on, and I know that there are various bits of legislation and guidance in individual US states about how this how this works and what people are expected to do. And I know you can fill in some of the gaps for me in a second. But I think this is really interesting. I think that one of the first things I think that we sort of spotted when this started to come into to the US was people putting ridiculous pay bans on jobs. So it's like this job has got a salary range of $20 to $200,000 and things like that, just to get through that legislation, which is not particularly helpful. I think ultimately there are a couple of things in this for me that are incredibly positive. First of all, we're giving job seekers what they want. Everyone wants to know the salary or the salary range for a job when they see it, because that, even when people say, well, money's not the most important thing about moving jobs, but understanding the range in which you're playing, I think is critical in terms of making those right decisions, not wasting people's time, and getting the right talent in the right jobs. Also, from a benchmarking perspective, it means that pay should technically be fairer for everyone within the company and everyone outside the company. And I think anything that takes away some of the horrendously weaselly negotiations about what we pay people, those kind of horse trading between hiring managers and recruiters and asking people about their previous salary and all those kind of things just to see if we can get them cheaper than we wanted to pay. I think anything that takes that out of the recruiting process is fundamentally a good thing. So it's sad in a way that this is being driven by legislation, but to me, while it may be problematic to some employers in some way, this is a tremendously positive thing in terms of the way that labor and talent and skills are gonna work in the future. Jocelyn, what do you think about this? Are there any downsides to this?
Well, I think all your points are just spot on, Matt. And for the most part, it's all really beneficial across the board. You're going to have less disparity in terms of compensation, especially between men and women or racially. So that's really important. And then there's also a level of transparency internally that allows employees the ability to really understand what they have to do to get to the next level, to get to the next pay grade, et cetera. So that's really helpful. There are a couple downsides more for the employer than anything else. And it's something that can easily be mitigated. One is, the fact that in some states you have to provide pay grades to existing employees. And when that happens, there might be somebody who has more tenure or somebody who's just a really high performer who happens to be making more than another person or others, and it can create resentment. And so it's really important for HR to be quite transparent about the reasons why somebody might be making more and what you can do, the individual, the employee, can do to get that pay increase as well. So that's a way of mitigating it. The other is the compliance aspect. Because there's no federal legislation around pay transparency, it's all on a state-by-state basis. So number one, it starts to get really confusing when you are posting jobs and you're trying to figure out what pay transparency requirements you have to meet in job postings. Some states will say you only have to do it if the role is intended to be in that state. Other states say if you have X number of employees, you must do it no matter what, no matter where the employees are. So a wide range of requirements. That's really tough. And so it's easy to be malcompliant with these requirements. And so HR really needs to educate themselves on what those are.
And Rhona, pay transparency, are you all for it?
Yeah, I'm definitely all for it. I was working at a company in the early days when the legislation started coming out. And it was really, for me as a recruiter, it was great to be able to ask a hiring manager, what does someone at the bottom of the range have? And what does someone at the top of the range have? Because now candidates are educated. They now know the entire range. Obviously they're naturally going to want the top of the range, but as a recruiter you're going to have to explain to them why they are in wherever part of the range they fit in. And just having that articulated and clear, because those are conversations that were happening from day one, was amazing. But for HR, for my HR counterparts and for the hiring managers, it was a struggle just having people really define that, because
Mm,
before it
mm,
was kind of like, well, if this person asked for more and it was within the range, then we're just giving it to them. But it's like now it's why.
mm. And also the amount of bias and discrimination and things that happen in within that, if it isn't defined, it's great to kind of sort of move past that, isn't it?
Yeah. And just having that information was, anytime bias was creeping in and hiring manager was just like, I just want to pay this because I really want this person, I could confidently be like, wait, remember you said that they needed to have this to be there? I can
Mm.
fight that one for you, but you have to, like, we have to be on the same page. It was great. It was mostly beneficial, everything that I saw.
So that is a big thumbs up from us, in that situation. And now it's time for the situation room. Sorry, Jocelyn, I was in the middle of finishing my beer. What do you have for us this week?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we have an employee who has a coworker in the workplace who, in this case, is actually coming to their office 10 to 15 times a day for at least 5 minutes to talk about themselves or complain. So this individual has tried to very clearly communicate that tried to demonstrate at least that they're not interested in what this person has to say and that it's annoying. And they even say that what this person is saying is uncomfortable to them. And as an example, this coworker said that they wanted to put somebody 6 feet deep. So this individual doesn't really know what to do at this point, how to handle it. And yeah, that's what we're here to talk about today.
First of all, I think I've worked with this person.
I
And
think
what's
everybody has, Matt.
yeah, no, absolutely. So what's your take on this particular one? What advice would you give in this particular situation?
Yeah, so general advice to the employee would be to have a more direct conversation with the individual and just say, hey, you're coming to my office too often. It is impacting my productivity, my ability to concentrate at work, etc. I can't have you coming into my office all the time. Please let's just not do this anymore. And then I think it's also appropriate for this individual to say, the things that you say to me make me feel uncomfortable. Provide some examples, and then see if this individual kind of changes their behavior. If they don't, then going to the manager or going to HR would be appropriate. I would even argue that with this person having said that they wanted to put someone 6 feet deep, that would be good cause to go to HR straight away and have them help resolve the issue. And we talked last week about, you know, employees going to HR just to kind of stir trouble and
Mm,
just talk
mm,
about gossip and how HR really needs to push back and tell them that they need to resolve conflict on their own. But in this case, I think it would be completely appropriate for this individual to go straight to HR and have the conversation. Then on the HR side, in terms of how this would be handled, in my opinion, and I'm kind of strict um, when it comes to employee relations, if it was in fact true that this individual was talking about wanting to put coworkers 6 feet deep, I'd probably give that person a corrective action,
mm, mm,
and just let them know, hey, you cannot do this again.
mm.
And you are impacting somebody's productivity. It must stop. And then kind of take it from there.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is kind of this is quite a sort of a clear cut case if these things have happened because of what that person's been saying. But I suppose it comes back to that bit where where it's not obvious, where it's not that not that clear cut.
Mhm.
What should people do? If they're not crossing the line, do you think that do you think that the people that we have the skills to be able to deal with this type of conflict in the workplace, whether that's kind of like different generations coming into the workplace to communicate differently, or remote working since the pandemic? Do you think that that has had an effect on people's ability to deal with conflict and deal with these kind of things?
I think it's much easier dealing with conflict when it's virtual.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
for some reason, it just is. So I'm not sure if we're seeing more of it or less of it. But what I can say is I think it's really important for HR to be training and developing their team on soft skills. In
mm,
this
mm,
case, demonstrating courage is kind of a core competency that somebody would exhibit if they were to approach this individual and tell them, hey, you're impacting my productivity. I can't have you doing that. Maybe you're making me uncomfortable, whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is, and I think it especially depends on personality and age, not all people are going to be comfortable doing that. And that's understandable. That's
mm.
okay. That's where a manager can step in. It doesn't necessarily have to be HR.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that soft skills thing is really interesting. Is really interesting as well. And I suppose it's kind of like, what do you think it's an employer's responsibility to train someone on when it comes to soft skills and communication, and what should we just expect it from someone we're employing to kind of arrive with? Where does that lie fit these days?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First is if you have values and core competencies in your organization, which you should, no matter the size of your company, you're able to really leverage those to help first vet candidates during the talent acquisition process to see if this is somebody that's going to be the right culture fit for your organization. But then also, as I mentioned, training and developing and upskilling individuals that are clearly aligned to the competencies and values of the organization.
And also, I think that this is something very much where managers set the tone as well in terms of kind of showing the way in terms of communication and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why manager training is so critical. They're kind of the first line of defense, and their ability to, I've seen quite often, companies just promoting top performers into manager roles, and they might not be equipped to handle, these types of issues or have the soft skills that they need or the core competencies they need to be a leader. And then the company also won't train them. So they're doing them a big
Mm,
disservice. They're doing
mm.
the other employees a big disservice as well. And so it's really critical for HR to come in and provide that level of support.
Absolutely, and there was no swearing in this week's post, which is which makes a difference. Jocelyn, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. And I believe that we now have a guest on the line. Hey, Hung, how you
How's
doing?
it how's it going, Matt? Good to see you, dude.
Yeah, good to see you. I like your background. I like your background. You got is that some sort of neon light you've got in the background there?
It is. You know what? I bought this in AliExpress in order to just brighten the thing up because I realized that I was so boring in the background, Matt. I mean, I'm boring in the front ground anyway, but I need, you know what I mean? So
You're
got to
not
give
at
the
all.
crowd,
You're not at all.
got
Yeah,
to give the crowd something. So
yeah.
hence I whacked that up. Hopefully gives a bit of cheer to people.
My little sign at the back actually says on air as well, but it just kind of clashes with the camera, so it just looks like this weird green, weird green thing. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to talk to you. Just to start off with, for people watching who may not know who you are, and I'm sure there can't be very many, but there might be some. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, no worries. So, hey everybody, my name's Hung Lee. I still self-identify as a recruiter, even though it has been probably a decade plus before since I recruited someone properly. But I've worked in recruiting for 20 years, agency side 10 years, in-house 4 or 5 years. A lot of startup recruiting. Launched my own tech startup, which didn't work. But that that burned 3 years of my life. But from that, sort of recruiting brain food emerged, which is basically a newsletter, a live stream, an online community. And I guess these days I kind of curate and manage that. So yeah, I'm a person that sees myself as a recruiter and wants to help recruiters. And the way I do that is to, hopefully provide good information and clear out sort of spaces where people can have a good chat.
No, absolutely, and it's it's such an important job these days because there is so much information out there. I think anything that really helps people, get that signal and all that noise is such a crucial thing. I suppose on that note that you're in a unique position that it's basically your job to spend the week crawling through all of the information that's out there to try and, to curate stuff that's kind of really going to help recruiters and TA professionals and everyone move the kind of profession forward. So, you've probably seen a lot this year in terms of, thoughts and facts and all that sort of stuff. So, tell us about 2024. We've got about 2 weeks left. What have you seen? What are the big trends? What's sort of really cut through the noise this year?
It's interesting you asked the question because I'm actually in this I'm in the middle of writing this what happened in 2024 series. So I've whacked out like 15 things so far. I've got 5 more to get out there to make 20. And yeah, everyone who's directly experienced it, it's obviously been another challenging year. Very, very difficult in industry. People in work, everyone is saying they're massively overstressed, overburdened with work. We know that TA teams in particular have been pared back. I saw a McKinsey post actually today, which kind of revealed that the HR functions have disproportionately borne the burden of cutbacks, basically, from most corporates, and that's where a lot of the cost savings have gone. So our entire sort of industry has really had that sort of another year of. So very, very tough. Big trends, I think. This is the year where we've lost the naive optimism. I think there's a few people were hanging on to that at the start of this year. Thought, right, the year's going to turn. Not really. It's not that sort of situation. I think we're beginning to realize that what we're seeing is not just a matter of cycles, but really a seismic shift in terms of how technology is interfacing with society. That's going to transform the way in which we work, and we're kind of subject to that transformation. Our challenge is to actually take possession of it, and stop being such a subject and being an actor on it and influence it going forward. So that's the big message I've got to try and communicate to the community for 2025.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think it's these are long term trends, and it hasn't even got started yet. And how's it going to end? And I think that whole thing about people stepping up, taking responsibility, helping to shape this is it's kind of critical, isn't it? And do you think that message is getting across? Do you see people trying to step up, take control, shape the future?
It's hard, mate, and I don't want to condemn anybody for not doing it. And I think that the two trends that we just talked about just now are kind of feed into each other. If we're over capacity, if everyone's running at 120%, guess what? You haven't got any percent to do the new stuff. And so we've been like on the business as usual, which is just mega overstressed, working all hours of the week to try and get things done. And we've not been able to create the capacity to do the experimentation. Now, the reality is whenever you change any process, classic change management, there's going to be a downturn of your efficiency as you make that shift. It's a true for any, it's like learning to swim. You're great at the front crawl. That's brilliant. If you want to learn the backstroke, guess what? You're going to go slower as you learn how to do the backstroke. And you've got to give yourself the bandwidth to do it. So that's been really tough for us. I think it won't get any easier in 2025, but we have to grasp the nettle, which basically means having a strong negotiation with the business, even though we feel as if right now, institutionally, I think HR and TA are probably as low in confidence and morale as we've been for some years, we've somehow got to find it within ourselves to go back to the business and say, yes, we can make you more efficient. We can do all of these things, but here's what I need to get there. And create the bandwidth to say, right, we have to just run a bunch of experiments such that we can test whether some of these techniques, technologies actually work.
No, absolutely. I think that's yeah. I mean, that's certainly a kind of a massive challenge in terms of shifting this, and it's almost like the overarching narrative is there. We've got AI. We can be more efficient. We can do all these kind of things, and that's very much coming down from the top of the business. Going back to McKinsey, start of the year, they kind of released this big report about this is the year of productivity because productivity is a way that businesses can drive value and create revenue in the kind of economy that we've got. But it's kind of like you have to sort of work out how that works within a business, don't you? And it's kind of just folding that down through the business and working out what it means for the individual parts. And that seems to be where we are and where the challenge is. Another question in your kind of review of 2024, which I think I read one of your articles this afternoon actually about that. What's the thing that surprised you the most?
I thought we'd use programmatic advertising more. one of my predictions. I looked at I also do a forecast post, which I do basically at either the very beginning of the year or the very fag end of the year at the end. And I look, and it's again 20 predictions. You know what, Matt? I got every single one of them completely wrong. It's like way off on everything. And one of the ones I thought we would make more use of was programmatic, because I kind of anticipated that the job applicant flood will continue to accelerate given the economic conditions. We've got more motivated job seekers. We've also got greater use of AI that's going to increase the applicant rate per candidate, so to say. So I thought, you know what, that's going to increase. And I anticipated that the employer response would be to use basically some smart advertising so that you could take down a job if you hit a number, rather than put a duration-based ad on there, and just suck in all of these impossible to process candidates. Turns out that hasn't happened. What has happened is that companies simply stopped posting any jobs. So they thought, right, we're not going to bother. So
Yeah.
programmatic hasn't really increased, in my opinion, even though certain sort of individual vendors will say, yes, we've increased here or there, but on aggregate, I don't think that's significantly increased. We haven't seen huge adoption in the UK or EU compared to the US. So yeah, that surprised me, but you know what? It doesn't surprise me that I get things wrong, Matt. So maybe
Well,
I
I
shouldn't
think,
be surprised.
I think that is a very sound prediction. I think it's just the timescale on it, because I think that, there is I think there's an inevitability about some of these things, just because, that's how marketing works. And that's where these things go eventually. And I think you're right there. There is a split between the US and the UK and Europe when it comes to programmatic adoption, which is surprising, not surprising, but it's quite interesting. So, I think that's a great prediction. It's just obviously a different different time scale. I want to talk a little bit about next year. Before we do though, let's talk about a kind of an undefined time in the future. So look forward a little bit. The day that this kind of all sort of plays out a little bit more and reforms itself, what do you think talent acquisition is going to look like in the, I wasn't going to say the post AI world, but when we're kind of properly into the AI world, we're having this conversation in 5 years' time, 3 years' time, 2 years' time. What do you think talent acquisition looks like?
I think it won't be called talent acquisition. I think the name's got to go, because that's really and we've changed names before, right? I mean, HR used to be personnel,
Yeah.
personnel then went into HR, recruitment used to be, then turned into talent acquisition. Talent acquisition will go. Reason why is simply because the idea of acquiring talent, meaning permanent full-time employees, that's going to continue to shrink as a demand. So companies, in terms of overall size, in my opinion, we've already hit peak organizational size. That was probably the overhiring era just after the pandemic sort of lockdowns were over, where all of these tech companies were charging out and hiring tens of thousands of people. Amazon's never going to get more people. Meta is never going to hire more people than that period. So there's going to be successive downsizing as companies go and become more efficient. Therefore, it's actually important for us in TA to recognize that that's the direction of travel. And it's a strategic mistake for us to hang on to that sort of label and also hang on to the parameters that that label gives us. We've needed for a long time to expand our scope. The scope expansion needs to include anybody, any worker, regardless of contractual relationships with the organization. We need to be in charge of that entire talent universe. How are you able to deliver the skills and capacity that the business needs on demand? That's what we need to be doing. So I think if we're locked into this mindset of talent acquisition, number one, words matter. It changes our parameters, it changes our thinking, and it constrains our thinking. And number two, it actually changes how other people think of us. When people look at a spreadsheet and say, oh, there's talent acquisition, or there's a person that manages the gig economy, or there's a person that manages contingent workforce, guess what? We're going to crunch down TA. That means, crunch down for FTEs, TA can go. So we need to expand scope and rename and basically understand that our function isn't just growing companies in terms of headcount, it's increasing business capacity. That's what we really do. We
Absolutely.
provide companies with capacity. So whether that's a full-time worker, great. Gig platform, great. Interim person, amazing. Maybe it's an automated worker.
I was going to say exactly that, right? Robot, AI, all that kind of stuff. I think that makes I think that makes perfect sense, and it's interesting to see some of those conversations sort of starting kind of now. And then just 1 minute. I know you're probably writing loads of predictions for next year, and I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to publish them. But just give us a quick idea about what you think is going to happen in 2025.
Oh my God, I got 60 seconds. I should have really prepped for this. And there's no thunder to steal. But one thing which I think is quite an uncomfortable scenario, but let's talk about it. I think there'll be a divergence between the US and basically UK, EU when it comes down to the conversation on DE&I. I do believe that Trump 2.0 is going to be really bad for diversity and inclusion. It's going to be pretty bad for HR, to be honest with you. And I do believe that basically the conversation will split. I think the UK and EU, most of this is settled stuff. We're not going to reverse any. I think I heard you before talking about pay transparency, for instance, gender representation on board level. That's already in the legislation over this side of the Atlantic. That's going to continue as is. I do think basically the UK and EU will continue to be fairly progressive when it comes to DE&I. However, I think our friends in the US are going to have a battle on their hands on that. So there'll be basically a split. We'll have different conversations, and it's going to be tough for our US colleagues. But hopefully they can count on our support on these trying moments, shall we say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late where you are, so great stuff. Thank you very much for being on the show. And now let's move to trending or ending. Hey, Rhona, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. So tell us, AI hiring interview policies. What's going on?
Yes. So I've said it for a while. We're in the bot versus bot era of hiring. Look, we're using it. We're excited about using it. At least HR tech vendors are. Candidates are as well. And there's a lot of talk about what's acceptable and what isn't. But the truth is, unless you spell it out and lay it out clearly, it's up to whoever, right? There's there's a lot of chatter online of what candidates are doing. Is it ethical? If it's unethical, all of that. But there's very little policies of what companies are expecting. I've actually only found, and this is after many searches and a lot of conversation, because I have an upcoming podcast episode about this. So after a lot of research, I only found that Greenhouse is one of the only organizations who has a clear guidelines, and it's on their careers website. It's like how you use AI. Most companies are saying, no, you can't use AI for interviews. No, you can't use AI for your resume and things like that. And they're even going the step of disqualifying people who they find are using AI. But the thing is, you can't really disqualify candidates for using AI if you haven't told them what's acceptable. And simply saying don't use AI is not realistic in today's world. It really isn't. And also, why not go the step further and explain to candidates how you're using it? Because that transparency is also something that candidates want to know, and it's really going to differentiate you. So, like I said, I've been obsessing about this topic. I'm so excited for that podcast episode that's coming out about it. And we're talking about like both the ethical and unethical ways that candidates are using um, AI for their interviews. I loved how Greenhouse took the stance, and this is me summarizing their policy. Like, look, we know you guys are using it. We're using it too. You can use it for prepping. Amazing. We love that. Don't use it to feed you questions or answers to interview questions live. Great. If they catch someone doing that, they can, in all their right, say, you're disqualified because we laid this out clearly. So that's kind of like, I think at some point we're going to have conversations of what should these policies include and what should they not include. But I think right now the first step should be let's actually have a policy. So is it trending? Is it ending? I think it should and it must stick. Without clear, realistic guidelines, we're really heading into like muddy waters, like where there's going to be bias, there's going to be inequity, there's going to be a lot of confusion, because a lot of what I read of people's solutions to candidates using AI is really taking us back years and years of what we've already done. So I'm interested to know in the chat, does your company have an AI use policy for candidates, and what is it? And Matt, what do you think?
Before I tell you, shout out to Tom there for his very kind feedback about the show. Hi, Tom. How are you? Good to see you. What do I think about it? This is first of all, I think you are absolutely spot on. It's like, how do you disqualify someone for using something that it's not illegal to use? There is a huge debate about, ethics and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not very clear about what that means, then you're right. And I think it's interesting. So I think that's one part of it. I think the second part of it is, how do you know? And I say that because I've seen a couple of examples from academia, actually. Someone at a school who had an essay, refused because they were accused of using AI, and they hadn't. But because, that particular school was looking for those kind of phrases that ChatGPT uses all the time, and that particular student had done an essay that was of a better quality than they normally did. So they presumed, there was an assumption they were using AI. They weren't. And likewise, again, I was reading about, someone writing their master's dissertation, and someone used AI, didn't get caught, got the degree, felt bad about it. Someone didn't, and then was accused of doing it. So I think there's a bit about, well, how do we know? And then I think there's the bit about this whole definition. It's like, is this cheating? Is this not cheating? Where do we draw the line? Is getting someone to feed you the answers to interview questions that are not your, things you don't know about, that feels like cheating. But I think people will have different views on this. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I that's why I think it's really, you have to be clear about it. But you bring up a great point. Like, how do you know if people are using it? Because a lot of what I've seen, the discussions online are like, well, it's easy to know if a candidate's reading these answers, they'll sound robotic. But then what about neurodiverse candidates who
Absolutely, yeah.
speak in a way that you might perceive as robotic, but that's just how they speak? And like you said, we can see anytime someone posts like, oh, anytime someone uses this in their post, I know it's ChatGPT. And so many times I felt like ChatGPT came to steal like my emoji use. Like, go back to my post from
Yeah.
2019 and I was using the emojis.
And
ChatGPT
no one
stole
can
it.
ever use the phrase "let's dive in" ever again. It's instant
Right?
ChatGPT.
And then every one of my podcast episodes used to start with like blah 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 intro, and then let's dive in. Now
Yeah.
I can't say that.
Exactly. And and also we just, we get to this arms race point where everyone is using better AI to catch out everyone else's AI. So, fundamentally, I think this is trending in terms of people need to define what they mean. But I think it's also ending because we just need to rethink recruitment in terms of how do we actually assess people in a way that's appropriate for the job that they're going to do. And I think that's a fundamental thing. There are cultural norms and overstories about recruitment and how recruitment works, and this challenges that, and that makes this a kind of a really big deal. But do you think that's ultimately the answer to this?
Yeah, that's really the answer. And it's funny that you positioned it that way, because in everything that, like, that's how I wrapped up that episode that I was talking about, saying at the end of the day, you really have to focus on how you're evaluating people and not so much on how people are showing up to interviews. I gave examples of things where this had happened. Standings for interviews. I work in tech. That's where I recruited the bulk of my career. That has been happening for a while, way before AI. Like, I had that happen for in-person interviews, and I'm thinking, you're absolutely not the same person that was here. Like, I'm not, like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
But that's been happening. People are going to do it. So you really have to double down on how you evaluate.
Absolutely. I remember back when I had a proper job, I was running a digital team in an agency, and we had a freelancer in who'd come from a very reputable agency to come and help us with a particular technical problem that we had. And he was kind of working away, and then we looked over, and he had the kind of the how-to manual in his desk that he was pulling out and reading because he didn't actually understand what he was supposed to be doing. And that, he would have got through, whatever face-to-face screening process that agency had, and all this kind of stuff. So as you say, it has been happening for a really, for a really long time. And yeah, I suppose it's just, I think, going back to that point about defining this, I know that, certain graduate recruiters, college recruiters in the UK kind of came out and said, we ban you from using AI in the application. It's like, what does that mean? I'm using a spell checker that's got
Exactly.
AI in it. I'm using this that's got an AI in it. What does that, what does that do? And I think it's probably moving the mindset away from, AI writes stuff for you to AI can help you do really complicated tasks very quickly, and get a better outcome, that really uses your skills to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's always been my approach, especially working with technical hiring managers and stuff. It's like, okay, so what? They Googled the answer. Is that so wrong? Their ability to find the answer is really what you should be evaluating, not do they have the answers? Because especially in technical fields, things change so quickly that it's impossible to know all of the answers or what's going to be happening. Like, what you know today is outdated tomorrow. So the core competency of knowing how to find answers and using resources, that's what you should be evaluating. And I think that applies
Yeah.
to every type of job.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting that there was a sort of case in point with a big retailer in the UK earlier in the year, that went out and said, you know what, we're going to give everyone the interview questions in advance because we think that's good from a neurodiversity perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And there was this huge kind of media, it became this big media story as this, what are they, this is incredible, this is ridiculous. And again, it's that ingrained view about how people think recruitment should work. And I think this AI thing sort of plays into that, and that's why it sort of stirs up so much commentary and emotion. It's, interesting times. Rhona, thank you very much. As again, another interesting topic. So I'm going to say trending, but hopefully ending.
I like
that's my
that.
kind of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of another show. It has absolutely flown by. A big thank you to Jocelyn and Rhona, as ever, for their amazing contributions. A big thank you for Hung for staying up late and joining us and kind of previewing some of the stuff that he's writing. if you've not subscribed to Recruiting Brain Food, you really should, because he's it's always great, but there's some really interesting things that he's writing at the moment. Lots of content coming up from Purple Acorn. So tomorrow, Tuesday, 7 a.m. Pacific and 10 a.m. Eastern, you can get the amazing HR Morning Show. Then if you stay tuned after that, Hire Her, the Talent Collective podcast, which is actually on Wednesdays at 11 Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. My First Job with Mike Wood continues. That's on Thursdays at 11 Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. And then there is a new show from the desk with Jada Monte Morano, and that is making its debut this Friday, 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. If you want to see more of Purple Acorn, head to the website, purpleacornnetwork.com. You can find the podcast of this episode and all of the other episodes on Spotify. And this is Matt Alder, clocking out.